Dying in Grace, dedicated to exploring all aspects of death and dying and end-of-life care. Death is the last taboo, and it's not discussed, yet everyone is going to experience it. Our goal on this show is to reintegrate death as a natural part of life so that we can discuss it and be prepared for it. My name is Arlene Stepputat, and as your host, my own experiences with death and dying, as well as being of service to those who are dying, has prompted me to create this educational opportunity for all of us. To learn more about my personal journey with death and dying and how I learned myself to befriend death, please go to our website, www.dyingingrace, and click on Media, and you'll be able to hear a 3-minute video about my own journey and experiences with death and dying. That's our purpose, to remind all of us what we already know, that we know how to take care of each other when we're sick and we're dying. And this is our opportunity to remind ourselves and get additional tools. The more we learn about dying in grace, the more we understand the importance of living fully in each moment. Each week, this show will bring an expert on a particular aspect of death and dying for an in-depth discussion. And this week, I'd like to introduce my guest, Luciana Mitzkun, who is a dementia care specialist. So welcome, Luciana, and thank you so much for being on our very first show.
Very happy to be here. It's an honor.
Yeah, so Luciana, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into understanding dementia. How did you become a specialist?
I have been working with dementia patients for over 20 years now. And it started in the 1990s, working with AIDS patients. I worked as an advocate for AIDS patients for quite a while. And after that, I worked for 10 years with patients with brain injuries, which sometimes people don't understand that, but they also suffering from dementia. Dementia that gets better, but it is dementia nevertheless. After that, I worked for 6 years with the Alzheimer's Association, who gave me extensive training on progressive dementias, which is Alzheimer's, frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia, Lewy bodies disease, etc. And now I am working with the Friendship Center, which is a daycare for dementia. So overall, dementia caregivers and dementia patients have been in my life for over 20 years, and it has been a journey and a pleasure working with them.
Well, and certainly with that broad background, you really are an expert. And you mentioned a couple of things, and I wanted to help our audiences understand, because there's a lot of confusion between the word dementia and Alzheimer's. People use them interchangeably. And can you first just help people understand those two things? Because you mentioned, for instance, dementia through AIDS, and people might not understand how that works. So
yeah, it is okay to use those terms interchangeably as long as you know the difference. And the difference is dementia simply is a malfunctioning of the brain. So every time your brain starts defaulting on cognitive skills, it's dementia. And dementia can be temporary, and it can be progressive, and it can be static. So there are different kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's is a disease that causes dementia. One of them, so many different causes for dementia. Brain trauma can do that. Some infections can do that. A lack of vitamin B12 can cause dementia. People who have recurrent insomnia may suffer from dementia. So it's a condition that simply designates that the brain is malfunctioning. What's important is what's causing the dementia.
Right, so some of the things you're saying, like dehydration or B vitamin deficiency or
hormonal imbalance.
So some of that dementia can be corrected with attention. Is that accurate?
There's some forms of dementia that can be corrected depending on the cause. So if you're thinking, if you're noticing that your cognitive abilities are declining or of your loved one, the most important thing, number one, go to a doctor. go and find out why it is. In some cases, it's fixable. In some cases, it's easy. And in some other cases, it requires medical attention. And it can be a prolonged change in your life. So you have to address that. Don't think that's going to go away. Sometimes it will, but many times it won't. And you need to address that.
But I do think that people are terrified that is going to be the diagnosis, and primarily that the diagnosis is going to be Alzheimer's. I mean, that's what people jump to. Mm-hmm. And so what can we do to encourage people to get it checked out? I mean, do you have...
When families come to me asking that very same question, and they do, and I think, well, why would I be encouraged to look for medical treatment when I know that there is no cure? My response is there is no cure, but there are treatments. Mm-hmm. And the treatments can be very effective in managing some of the symptoms of the disease. But also, Alzheimer's is not the only cause of dementia. There are so many others that can be addressed, and they should be addressed. So the medical care, even though cannot cure the disease, can make it better, can make living with it more pleasant and tolerable, just not only for the person suffering from the disease, but for their caregivers and for their loved ones who are taking care of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was just looking at statistics. I mean, the amount of people, you know, this so-called silver tsunami coming down the pike with aging population, and it is generally older people that get this disease. And are we ready for this, you know, as we age? Is the care system ready?
The care system is definitely not ready. There is a lack of care, because a person with dementia, doesn't matter which dementia the person is, they cannot be left alone. They need 24/7 custodial care, and our healthcare system is not geared to provide that. So it's up for the families to provide that kind of care. Very expensive. It costs 3 times more to take care of a person with dementia than any other conditions that you would see in the elderly population. And by the way, you mentioned, you know, more in our senior population, but no, we are seeing more and more people in their 50s and in their 60s coming down with dementia, either from Alzheimer's or vascular or other forms of dementia. So it is snowballing much more than we were expecting, unfortunately. The numbers that we are seeing, over 5 million people with Alzheimer's, that's Alzheimer's alone. And Alzheimer's accounts for about 70% of all dementias in the elder population.
And I know from my own work that Lewy bodies is being diagnosed more, that there was a point where it wasn't. Can you just briefly touch, because that's a particular kind of disease that's, I think, in my own experience, a lot more challenging. Mm-hmm. Not that Alzheimer's alone isn't, but Lewy bodies has another factor, I think, with the symptomology that's really tough for people.
Alzheimer's was first defined by Dr. Alzheimer's in 1905. And on those days, people would name their found disease after themselves. Right. So Alzheimer's became Alzheimer's disease. Now, Alzheimer's had a student working with him called Dr. Lewy, who found out in a different patient after Dr. Alzheimer's that there was a different kind of dementia. Something else was going on in the brain. And he called that disease Lewy bodies after himself. So it's a cute name, Lewy bodies. And people are like, oh, I prefer having Lewy bodies than Alzheimer's. No,
you don't.
No, you don't. Lewy bodies is unpredictable. It causes a lot of hallucinations and also some motor coordination problems. So people are very likely to need a wheelchair sooner rather than later, and have a really horrible time. And also in Alzheimer's, there is a cognitive decline that is very gradual. In Lewy bodies, the cognitive decline is in bumps and ups and downs. And for the caregiver, many times the caregiver thinks that he's fooling me. He's doing that on purpose. This can't be possible, because sometimes he's doing great and sometimes he is almost comatose. And how do you understand that? That's Lewy bodies disease. And many times it's associated with Parkinson's disease. So it's either Parkinson's with Lewy bodies or Lewy bodies with Parkinson's symptoms. And that was the case with Robin Williams. And after he died, there was a lot of attention paid to Lewy bodies, which is, unfortunately for him, but for all the other patients, it takes sometimes a celebrity to be diagnosed with something, so the medical community will pay more attention to it.
Well, and I think what's really true, and I think with this disease, Robin Williams took his own life when he found out he had this diagnosis. And I know there was some controversy about the drugs and different treatment, but I think what's true, and maybe why people avoid the information when we suspect I can't remember right, or I'm seeing it in someone I love, my partner or my mother, is because when that diagnosis comes, if indeed I'm 64 years old and I'm diagnosed with Alzheimer's, that's the first death. That is a death. You tell me I have Alzheimer's, I know that path. I know where I'm going. And I know ultimately I'm going to die. But I could be in a declining state for a really long time. And you mentioned the caregivers. If you're a family caregiver, most of them are probably not equipped to deal with the disease. What do you see? How do the family caregivers cope? What do they do over this long haul?
They definitely go through a lot of shock and grief from the very first day of the diagnosis. And sometimes to avoid that, they will not seek a diagnosis, which is such a mistake. But given a diagnosis, they will go through shock and grief. And it's an interesting kind of grief because it's a recurrent grief. It's a grief that keeps rolling and growing on itself. The first grief is the loss of the person you've known for all your life or for many, many years. They are starting to change, and your relationship is starting to change. The dreams and plans you have made are changing. They are no longer going to be like that. And it takes many years, and sometimes it's very difficult for them. At the same time, they have to keep themselves together to keep the person with dementia safe and content and engaged, because they cannot look for activities for themselves. So the best thing a family can do after looking for the appropriate medical care is looking for help, looking for respite, looking who is going to help me take care of these patients, who is going to look after him while I take my break. So without doing that, a person will burn out because it's an emotional toll, it's a financial toll, and it's a physical toll to help a person with dementia.
So we have a great resource here in Santa Barbara. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where somebody in our community could get some respite in case they don't know?
I would definitely recommend visiting the Friendship Center where I work. I am the Family Services Director there. And we offer daycare services for seniors. You don't have to have dementia, but for the ones with dementia, it's an amazing place. They have care, they have directions, they have 3 meals a day, companionship, activities. They feel engaged. So when they come home, they are excited. They're telling stories about things they did during the day. And it's a complete change in the environment for the patient, while it's a great break, affordable for the family. So people can continue having working in the regular jobs or doing groceries
Or
errands,
taking a nap or going to
taking
the
a nap,
beach.
reading a book,
Yeah,
taking care of themselves.
We have, and I think we all know someone who's taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's. And I think initially people think they can do it, and it is a long haul. It's a really long haul to take care of somebody with Alzheimer's. So we have two places in our community
Yes.
that are both umbrellas. So I believe you have a location in Montecito.
And one in Goleta.
One in Goleta. And also you have a special contract now with the Department of Veterans Affairs. So you want to just mention that, because I think that's really important with our elder population who are veterans and what can
Yes.
show up for them, including PTSD.
We do have a contract with the VA, and the VA would pay for the complete fees of eligible veterans according to their criteria. It's a fabulous job, fabulous help for the families, and we do support group for the veterans and special programs for them. The support group for the veterans is such a great idea, because I don't know if you noticed, but with Alzheimer's disease, a person goes back in time, in particular Alzheimer's disease. So your memories are being erased from starting from the most recent ones to the later memories. But let's say a combatant, a veteran combatant, who has been in war, let's say in Vietnam, and has suffered trauma. Maybe that person has been through therapy and helped solve that. Now the Alzheimer's is erasing the years of therapy, is erasing their healing. And once again, they see themselves in trauma, in that moment, and sometimes they get stuck there because the trauma is so profound. So providing supportive services for them at that point in time with Alzheimer's is so important. So by joining the group with the camaraderie, we have a fabulous facilitator, Carol Metcalf. She is a military family counselor. She's funny, she's a comedian, and she brings all this trauma out and they process it.
That's beautiful, and there's no fee, right? The Department of Veterans Affairs for their veterans is paying, and that is a big boon, because as you mentioned earlier, care for people with Alzheimer's is really expensive. So with all your years of expertise, with all that you know, you've taken all the knowledge and created some books. And I wanted to have you tell us a little bit about Ahead of Dementia, which, by the way, I want to recommend to people. I have actually purchased it, given it to people I know that are dealing with dementia. So tell us about that book and why, if you're facing dealing with dementia in any way, you should purchase this book. Tell us how this book came about and why people should get it.
While I was at Alzheimer's Association, my job was pretty much introducing the concepts of dementia care to family members. And through the years, I saw them coming and going with the same questions. And many times I'm telling the same story, saying, I need to put this all together. While I was there, I was writing the newsletters, and every month I would write the newsletters with topics that caregivers would have asked me, not that I decided, they were asking me and I would write down. So at the end, I ended up making a little compilation and then filling it with A to Z of dementia care. And this is the result. So it's for caregivers.
And we have a screenshot.
For the flag. It's for caregivers, and it goes from the very symptoms. So, what's the difference between dementia or memory loss and normal aging?
Right.
Sometimes it's confusing. So it goes from there all the way to hospice care.
And you have a website, too, that people can access to get all that information. And one of the things, when you and I talked, that I really appreciated about this book and why I purchased it for our own friends is because caregivers don't have time to read a whole book. And what I loved about your book is, okay, I'm having trouble getting them to take a bath. I just look at that and there's, 2 pages or 3 pages. That just the quick recipe of how to work with it. So it's a great resource book. And I think it's so needed.
It was created for busy people who don't have the time, and you don't need to read the entire book to get. You go straight to the topic, and it's a complete information package for that particular topic. So it's bathing, is incontinence, is getting lost in familiar spaces, is traveling. All that is compartmentalized, and driving, huge topic for people with
driving is huge. And what I like about it is it's really user friendly. So where can people get this book?
It's available on Amazon and different outlets. So going to the website, you
Your
can
website
find
too. And you mentioned earlier that the book is being translated.
Yes, I'm so happy about that because it's the Hispanic community needs that kind of information, and there's very little written for them. So it's not going to be a book written for a Hispanic population. It's going to be the same book translated into Spanish. So it's the very same information. It's not changed. And we will be offering it all over South America as well.
Oh, that's really exciting. And you're working on a second book, which I think you said is close to being completed. So tell us about that
It's almost done, and that's the conclusion of the work, because this one here is for the caregivers. I want the other half of it, which is for the people with memory loss, or MCI, mild cognitive impairment, a person who is in the beginning stages of dementia, and they need that information. They are always asking, what can I do to combat this that's happening? What can I do to make myself feel better? What can I do to be stronger against it? And that's the other part of it.
So since you raised the question, tell us 1 or 2 things if there's somebody in our audience that might see or just recently got diagnosed with MCI. What are 2 things somebody with MCI, if that's you out there, what are 2 things you could do to get stronger or to help yourself with this condition?
All right. Well, there's so many, but the most important one is physical exercise. Nobody associates physical exercise with cognitive health, but physical exercise is the most important thing. The one thing that has been proven by science and research to slow down the process of Alzheimer's disease is physical exercise.
So any kind, cardio, yoga, any kind of exercise?
Any kind, but aerobics, better. If you do it with a friend, better. If we do it with a group, much better. And most beneficial exercise would be dancing.
Oh, no kidding.
Social dancing.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, I know, now you're not saying that because you're a dancer, right? Because I happen to know you love dancing.
Maybe I am a dancer because I want to avoid dementia.
Oh, well, there you go, a hidden agenda. That's really great. So I wanted to ask you, so I'm a family member, I'm suspecting that something's wrong with my loved one. What's the most important first step I should take?
First step, taking your person to the doctor.
And any doctor or a specialist? I mean, who should I ask?
A neurologist.
A neurologist.
And not any neurologist. A neurologist specialized in dementia. Call the Alzheimer's Association to find out, look for support groups in our area. There's so many great support groups being offered. You don't have to be an active caregiver to participate. Go and ask who are the good neurologists in town for dementia care. And get your person there. Because there are ways of helping them with medication that can help clear the memory loss and a lot of the confusion, especially at early stages.
And I wanted to jump to the other side because you mentioned when we talked before the show started taping about like the biggest misunderstanding and the concern about the medical community. So can you talk about end of life and Alzheimer's and the thing that you've observed where people are missing the boat?
Many times people with Alzheimer's, which is a fatal disease, they don't show symptoms of impending death. They simply continue going, just declining little by little, and doctors will fail in finding, what are the symptoms to prescribe services for hospice. So many times we see people with dementia actively dying without the comfort of hospice care, which is such a disservice for the person and for the family. So I like to inform the families that even if your doctor has not prescribed hospice services, talk to your doctor about it. Push the subject, because a person will benefit so much from having those services, and also the family who normally is struggling. But don't be surprised if a person is with dementia receiving hospice service, and after 6 months they have to renew hospice services because they are still going. Another 6 months, they are still going. So that
well, as
happens.
long as they're medically eligible, they can, as long as they're showing some kind of decline, and sometimes there's comorbidities too.
Absolutely.
But that misunderstanding and the whole aversion to hospice is it's that whole idea of what end of life is, and people think hospice is for the last 2 or 3 days when the person is non-responsive, and there's so much offered. So every show we have the Book of Life, which is an opportunity for you to remember somebody that you have loved and lost. We believe that to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. So if there's someone that you'd like to add, please do that. We want to thank SBTV. I'd like to thank my crew, my director, and Luciana, I most especially want to thank you for sharing with us Get Her Book Ahead of Dementia.
Thank you, Arlene.